Lori Niles-Hofmann es co-founder de NilesNolen y desde Canadá va a presentar el futuro del aprendizaje y el desarrollo como socio estratégico. Una conferencia presentada por El Economista y el Tecnológico de Monterrey, dos de los sponsors oro de Fiat 2023. La conferencia será en inglés con traducción simultánea. Recuerden seleccionar el idioma que prefieran. Bienvenida, Lori, a Fiat. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I understand poquito. Lo siento, no hablo español.
Bien.
I speak Polish and German. I don't think either one would be very helpful today, but very much so I want to thank you and for having me here, as well as the sponsors for enabling this wonderful event. And thank you everybody for attending. Also too, I would like to really thank Nigiri for all of her thoughts. I had the pleasure of hearing her also speak in London, and it was great to hear a continuation of those thoughts, and it's definitely somebody to listen to. I do see all of you in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that as I speak, and feel free to ask any questions, comments, or anything that comes to mind as I go through this this presentation, and we will get started here. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we'll be able to hopefully share here. So I'm just going to come into this, and here we go. So today we're going to be talking about the what it means, the future of L&D as a strategic partner. And as you can see, of course, I already screwed up on technology because that happens with me. But what I wanted to start with is I chose the word partner very deliberately. And what I did with that is because we're going to see a shift where a lot of times we were actually controlling or in charge of the learning experience. And that is definitely going to be a shift, particularly as we head into this new future. And so I wanted to start with actually a short little video clip. And for any of you who are cat fans, to me, this is an example of what happened back in November 2022 when ChatGPT was launched. And I think we'll all agree it was a bit of a disruption. So let's have a look at what happened. We see the first cat here. And complete chaos. So the reason I show this video is, one, it's funny, but I think it also is an example of how we reacted. ChatGPT came in, and all of a sudden there was this panic. Some people, if you watch some of the cats, they observed, other ones just ran in multiple directions, some hid. And that's what I'm seeing really happen with us in EdTech and L&D. We seem to, we should have seen this coming, and I'm not afraid of it. I think it's actually a really good and healthy disruption. But I think it's a starting point that really is a punctuation on where we are now and how we're going to skill our workforces today and in the future. And yes, I see here, yes, it sure was a mess. It definitely was. It completely destroyed things. But what does this then mean, you know, to us? So first of all, we saw the large language models come out, and that seems to be what L&D has focused on because it helps us, you know, create more content, right? Suddenly, if you were on LinkedIn or on any of the other platforms, everybody was posting on, oh, how I made, you know, ChatGPT write a poem or a song, and everybody was playing with it, which was great, but it really was focused on this idea of content creation. And my question there is, it's a starting point, but it doesn't encompass all the things that are going to be possible. And don't worry, this presentation will not just be about AI and its impact, but it's simply a starting point. But the question of content creation, do we need it? So I'm sure some of you saw this became quite popular. There was an AI generated song featuring Drake and The Weeknd. I'm just going to say, because I'm Canadian, 2 Canadian artists, and look at the metrics that it had. TikTok, 13 million views, Spotify, YouTube, you can see how much impact it had. And that was generated by artificial intelligence. They did not write this song, and yet it could create a hit, which is really quite astounding. But is that really all that we want it to do? Because if we look at, there's a content tipping point. And if you look online, there's actually a website that I find quite interesting called Forgetify. And it's an alternative to Spotify. And I use Spotify, I think, like most people. And you can listen to over 4 million songs that have never even been played one time. So why am I using this example? Well, these are songs that were written by people. People took the time and effort and creativity to create this, and yet nobody listened. And then it gets on Forgetify. And this becomes quite an interesting challenge when we start to think of what are we actually doing with this technology and adjacent technologies. And I see Jessica has an interesting point here. Yeah, in the academic world, teachers and administrators, fight or flight, absolutely. And they're concerned about academic integrity, right? What does the essay mean at this point? When I actually saw a student on a university campus that had a t-shirt in December. So this was like only a few days after ChatGPT launched, and it said, sorry, my essay was late. ChatGPT was down. So they were already thinking that, hey, this is the direction that it's going to go. So we need to think differently about how we evaluate. What does it mean to demonstrate competency if there's AI? And is AI cheating? Or is it simply a shorthand, a different way for people to access information and synthesize it? So an excellent point there by Jessica. So we're seeing a lot of this, focus on content, but I think we need to look a lot more broadly. Now, you've probably heard this several times. We're in the 4th industrial revolution, and there's this feeling that, robots are taking over, but they're not. As we see new industries come in and emerge, what's happening is that people are going to require, reskilling in ways that maybe we never thought. According to the World Economic Forum, and, this is, I sometimes think is maybe a little bit of scaremongering or perhaps not, but they're saying that over 1 billion people need reskilling. Whether that number is true or not, I think we can all safely agree that it is an extremely large number. As that's going to be the problem, that it's something that we need to be prepared for. So what do we do? And here are some industries that are being impacted. For example, driverless cars. In Germany right now, you do have some parts of the Autobahn, their highways, that are now enabled for driverless trucks that are transporting goods across the country. I spoke to the daughter of a friend of mine, and she's turning 16, and I asked her, will you be getting your driver's license? I always wanted my driver's license as soon as I wanted when I was and I turned 16. She said, no, I'm just waiting for driverless cars. So it's a mindset shift. And with driverless trucks, yes, there are going to be people who are losing their jobs when it comes to driving the trucks. But all of these other skills are coming out. We need to understand, how to service the electronics for these new driverless trucks. There's transport and logistics. Now these trucks can drive 24, 36 hours just without a break, whereas before it was an 8-hour shift. All of these are new skills. There's ethics involved in it. So these are the types of new skills. So I don't worry about so much that people will be unemployed. There will be new jobs. It's, are we going to be skilled? Will we have a workforce skilled to handle this? But how that skilling happens is changing really, really, really quickly. And I think that that's something that we ultimately need to pay attention to. So, for example, ChatGPT launched November 30th, 2022. And yet this came out very, very quickly within a few weeks. There is a website called learnprompting.org. This was not built by a company. It was built by people. It was crowdsourced. What do I mean by that? It was a group of people who recognized themselves not learning experts, that decided, okay, this is going to be an impact, and they started to crowdsource their peers, anybody who wanted to contribute, and they created an incredible learning pathway and learning platform for people. I also see here, a comment that came in. I have a similar experience. My materials for education using AI tripled the views, shares opposed to the ones you designed. Yeah. And that's going to be something we're going to have to grapple with. Is it right? Is it wrong? We can't always necessarily fight it. This is simply where we are. But looking at this, that was crowdsourced. This was actually created by people to help their peers. And they did this in an incredible amount of time, just using their network. They launched it in 30 days. They were able to create, these are just some of the statistics, almost 1 million users. And I'm sure, I looked at this just a couple of weeks ago, so I'm sure that there's even more right now. On Discord, that's the platform that gamers use, they've got 40,000 users. They've used artificial intelligence to translate this into 9 languages, and more will be coming, I'm sure, and it's 60 learning modules. And I went through this particular program just myself, and it's pretty good. And it's an amazing learning community. So you can see, again, this wasn't designed with learning experts. So should we be afraid as L&D professionals? And this is a tough question. On one hand, I think fear is a little bit healthy. Maybe we need to be aware of these things happening, but where does that leave us? We can't fight it. We can't control it. We can't be a teacher that says you cannot use AI to write your essay, because that's already happening. And Jessica points out here, very smart, and Jerry pointed out, it's time to adapt and change. We adapt or disappear. It's something that's already there. We need that open mindset. But it's a fundamental shift. So, for example, during the pandemic, as I mentioned, I'm Polish, my family lives there. This is me teaching my, at the time, 7- and 8-year-old niece and nephew how to speak English over Zoom. We did English lessons. So I had stuffed animal puppets, and I had signs, and we learned English together. It was something that was fun. Today, I speak with them, and they only use Google Translate. I went to visit them in Poland, and I could speak into the Google Translate and they would get the Polish. And I wonder, will they even need to learn language in the future? Will that even be a skill? I'd like to think it is, but this is the type of change we're looking at. And when I think back to my days in high school, I was terrible at math. And I said, I'll just use a calculator. My teacher said, well, you'll not always have a calculator in your pocket. And I'd like to say, Miss Federline, yes, now I do always have a calculator in my pocket. So did I need to memorize my times tables? Are these just indicators of the types of shifts that we need to think about? And do we need to reverse engineer the learning experience with AI? And I think that this is a positive move. Instead of thinking about content, when we look at our ecosystems that we're building, can we examine how people are acquiring skills? Can we look at all the factors, not just what content they take, but when and how and what their environments are like, gather that information and use AI to understand what created success? And that's probably going to challenge a lot of the ways that we think about success in learning and when we think about design. Maybe AI will have it better because it'll have analyzed the success of thousands or millions of people acquiring skills, and therefore we can reverse engineer back. But we also need to think about the what. What are we doing this for? And I look at this as a concept I like to call as right skilling. Right skilling is when we're really clear about what skills we're going to need now and in the future. So the skills for not just saying, hey, we're going to upskill everybody in a particular concept, but thinking deliberately about what skills we're going to need. And that's going to become very, very difficult. Right now, if you look at HR and L&D, if we peek over at their paper, their exam paper, and what they're furiously writing, they're moving to a skills-based environment. And in fact, when you look on LinkedIn today, it used to be you search by job title. Now you search by skill. And that's actually a good thing, but it has impacts for L&D. What do I mean by that? Well, before it used to be that if you were looking to be a coffee barista, you would look for the role of a barista. But companies are realizing that a barista in Starbucks is very different to a barista in Milan. And the skills that they have will be very, very different. The title is the same, but they do not necessarily do the same things. So companies can no longer hire by title. And by osmosis, then, L&D professionals can no longer teach to title. When we think about, project management, for example, those skills are going to be very different depending on what type of organization you have. So L&D needs to really think strategically about skills. And companies are thinking very differently about skills themselves. You'll see there's a lot of talk about companies wanting to inventory what skills they have as an organization. And we're going to see a lot of this also too move into academia. But we also have to think too that companies are looking at skills and saying, oh, we have these skills, therefore people want to use them. And that's not necessarily true. So there's going to be this friction between skills people have, skills people need to have, and skills the company wants them to have. And those aren't necessarily going to be aligned. So one of the things that I often see is that companies right now will say, okay, I'm going to give a content library to everybody. Now, if we do that, and I'm actually just going to pause for a minute. I'm thinking, was there a problem with the translation into Spanish? I think the sound went down. It looks like it's fixed. Is that correct? If someone could give me a thumbs up that it has been corrected. See? Okay, gracias. Okay. Thank you very much. So a lot of companies will buy a content library and then they will say, okay, everybody has access to it. And in theory, this looks good, but you end up with something very much so like this dog. The dog is learning to play piano, but we don't necessarily need a dog to play the piano, but they've learned it. And so we need to think very specifically about how we upskill and what we target. So the example I like to use is, imagine that we're a pizza factory and we need tomatoes. Do we grow them or do we buy them on the market? So talent and L&D need to really, really work together and figure out how and how many skills and what type of skills we need, rather than just saying everybody take them. And that's going to be a big change for L&D. We also need to think about how the learning experience design evolves when we have AI and data. So I put in here content as the center, but context, application, and data are all going to be involved in that. We're going to become that architect. So what I mean by that is, here's an example, and I use Spanish. We have a learner who completes, maybe on Duolingo, a level 4 Spanish exam, but then they're prompted the next time they log into Outlook or Excel to change their settings into Spanish. That's something that we architect. So it's that idea that we can use the technology as an enabler, a way that we can consider how we build the skills. So it's a very, very, very different working experience. We also need to think about the user-generated experience. So here, you'll see I'm a fan of Kylie Minogue, and on Facebook, I got a notification that, hey, they have a new song, and then it said, hey, you can add a picture and you can publish it to your Facebook. And it also goes on to Instagram. I point this out because the idea too of user-generated content and enabling that, the experts on the ground and what they do with it. And yes, that was my cat in the picture, but it's a very different way. We ourselves are not the creators. We're the architect of that learning experience. And if you take away anything from this presentation, this is really what we need to think about. I always like to leave with a few next steps. So big one here, first one that I say is find a teenager. Look to your own teenagers or locally. Teenagers, we like to think that we're just discovering AI. They are living and breathing it. We have they are the experts. And in fact, in your companies and in your academia, they are already way past what we're thinking in terms of AI. So we do need to find those people and listen to them, observe, because they're the ones who are living and breathing this. I would also urge you to learn about marketing automation. A lot of the thinking that's happening right now is from marketing automation. If you go to HubSpot, there will be free learning that you can take. I think that's something to look at. Probably look at the learnprompting.org example that, again, L&D did not build. I would also urge you to look at what are your company AI rules or your university rules around AI, and make sure that you are operating within them. We're all figuring this out. There's a lot of data privacy issues, so just make sure you know those. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it was a lot of information, a lot of different things, but I wanted to cover a number of trends that we're starting to see, and not just AI, but how we need to think differently about skills and where all of this is going. Most of all, have fun, and thank you very much for your time.